All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen. All right, let me go back to the intro slide here. All right. Yeah, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining today's Enterprise Support Customer Meetup. I know we're the third presentation today, and so hopefully we have an interesting topic for you. I'm Brent Everman. I'm a Senior Technical Account Manager here at AWS, and I'm here with John Paul Bonny from Duolingo, and we're going to talk about Duolingo's FinOps success story today. And so what we're going to cover is kind of the background of Duolingo. Hopefully most of you know who Duolingo is, and hopefully some of you have a streak with them as well. And we'll also talk about some of the challenges they face as they started to grow, and some of the FinOps culture that they instilled throughout their organization, and then how unit economics play a big part of what the FinOps team is tracking, and how they've dispersed that out through the engineering organization. Some recent case studies of things that we've enterprise support team and myself have worked closely with the Duolingo team on this year, and kind of the results that they've seen from that. And so how is Duolingo supported, or how has enterprise support supported Duolingo's FinOps journey? And so it's been through a variety of ways that we've helped support this journey. One is through, kind of enabling the FinOps team and helping build that team out for Duolingo, from, engaging SMEs who are, thought leaders within AWS on how to build out a FinOps practice, to various AWS programs and entitlements that Duolingo's engaged on, from, one, like running cost optimization reports, to bigger things like, the DynamoDB Platinum program that they enrolled in, and also enablement on specific services. One thing that we saw at Duolingo is, they were using specific services like DynamoDB, et cetera, but all the engineers didn't really understand best practices and, how to ensure that they were running in the most cost efficient manner. And those were some of the things where, we helped bring in expertise to help guide this FinOps journey for Duolingo. And I will turn it over to JP, who's going to lead us through the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Brent. Yeah, so like Brent said, my name is Jean-Paul Bonny, or JP. I'm a senior software engineer at Duolingo. I've been here 5 years currently on our FinOps team. Previously, I worked on our infrastructure team. So right now I'm focused on cost optimization. So yeah, a little bit about Duolingo's background. So we were started in 2012 outside of Carnegie Mellon University, where we were co-founded by Luis Valdon and Severin Hacker. At the time, the operations were small, where Luis, Severin, and other early employees were creating courses themselves. So at the time, we were running out of a monolith on AWS, and then just like slowly building up to scale. So then fast forward a few years, to July 2021, we IPO'd, we went public, and our infrastructure went from a monolith to microservices, a little bit of monolith, and yeah, how that goes. And currently, right now, Duolingo, we teach over 40 languages with over 200 courses. And we've even expanded beyond language learning. So we have also now have offerings in like math, music, and chess. But no matter whether it's humble beginnings or even like till the plethora of content we have now, our core mission is still the same, of making the best education in the world accessible to everybody. Next slide. So that comes with some challenges. And these are probably similar challenges that we've all faced in a ever-changing cloud infrastructure. So the first one being shared ownership. So you can imagine having microservices. Team A wants to make a feature in Team B service, but they might introduce like more dependencies. So it's kind of like, is it Team B's ownership since they created it, or is it Team A since they own the repo, so to speak? So that's kind of like one thing. And then you can imagine adding on top of that a fast velocity, where you're running hundreds of iterative A/B tests, different feature flags, different product course releases. So it can kind of be, and some things might succeed, some might not. So it's can be hard to keep track of cloud resources, and if we should clean them up, scale them up, so on and so forth. And then the other challenge, tying all together, is visibility. So you can imagine, like, well, having these microservices, having these different resources, how can you keep track of things when things are getting spun up, spun down, and how can you even like attribute them to actual changes? Sometimes you have to talk to like a product manager at lunch, or talk to some engineers, look at so many different dashboards just to figure out that increase in CloudFront bandwidth usage is due to like a course that just kind of surprisingly got launched. So how do we tackle all these things in this ever-changing environment? Next slide. Enter the FinOps culture. Now, before I get to like what has worked for Duolingo, let's talk about some things that haven't worked for us. So one of those being we had a cloud cost savings initiative program where essentially our leadership was telling engineers, oh, like if you can save on our cloud bill by X number of dollars, we'll give you like a 10% cut of it, which on paper sounds great because engineers like myself are like, oh, we can get some savings, but it wasn't really a consistent and like concentrated effort building culture. And sometimes, and on the worst side, it could create some like disincentives where people might add some careless logging, then clean it up, but not really tackle like harder cloud optimization problems. So it wasn't really the best way to say to have a FinOps culture. The next one being you could have tell teams and save money. Now this is great since instead of having one engineer, you can have a team of engineers working to save money. Like similar to like the cloud cost savings program, it was kind of more of like an ad hoc thing. Teams might get new OKRs or new objectives, so it might not really be the most sustainable way to introduce that. And then finally, we also have like part-time cost champions look at it, and those cost champions are kind of like embodying FinOps, like looking at like the best like cloud practices, monitoring core services, and trying to be able to kind of like keep their pulse on the cloud optimization spend. But as it has in the name, it's only part-time, and cloud optimization is more of a full-time job, so it also really wasn't sustainable to our architecture. So what things did work? I think first creating a full-time FinOps team. That's where we come in. But then also I think aligning on this problem of like gain cost visibility and how things keep changing. So then kind of trying to create a culture of tagging, monitoring, visibility, and then more importantly also just be able to create clear cost reduction actions for teams if we're able to identify those. Because for FinOps, we believe that cost needs to be part of every engineering decision, and the best way to optimize for costs is to make sure you're aware of it up front and be able to evolve it with the architecture. Uh, Next slide. So, what are some tools that we at Duolingo use to, I guess, like look at all of our resources and other things in the cloud? So one of the first ones we use is outside of AWS is Cloud Zero. Since Duolingo, we are a multi-cloud company. We use Azure, GCP, of course, AWS, and others to work to build our product on top of. And then of course, like Cost Explorer. So we're able to but we're able to use these tools to like look at our tags and look at our resources and tag those to like teams, production staging, so on and so forth to be able to kind of get like a good holistic view. And then because of having these tools to visualize these things, we're able to make some interesting actions out of these. The first one being we do have like a monthly cost review meeting with our leadership where we're able to talk about drivers and costs, whether it's like EC2 go up or down, ELB costs, Cloud Watch, so on and so forth. And then we're able to kind of create actions for our teams to kind of help keep that to kind of like optimize those costs respectively. Anomaly detection is another big one. So on the upper right here, I took a screenshot from one of our tools. The Duolingo alerts maybe kind of redact service names and hard dollar percentages. So apologies. I mean, hard dollar numbers. So I'll talk in percentages. Um, but essentially, we have a screenshot here. We're able to kind of show this to different service owners if we're able to flag anomalies. So, for example, here we have this service where we did notice like a rise in EC2 costs over the past 30 days. And if I can squint and look, I think it's like around like June, like 24th there, we saw like EC2 going up. So we're able to kind of flag this to service owners with like a clear graph of like when the costs are going up. And then they can easily attribute that to like product change or scaling change or something that happened with their service. And then of course, budgets are another thing that we can take, but I want to talk about something more interesting than budgets, which would be unit economics. So next slide, Brent. So yeah, I guess like what are unit economics? Ideally, these are a measure of like cost or profitability tied to an economic relevance to the business. And for our case, Duolingo, we have at least like two unit economics that we really do care about a lot. The first one being cost per DAU, daily active user. But the one I'll focus on for this slide is our cost per video call session. Now, it is 2025, and I'd be remiss to not mention AI in some way, shape, or form. So, Duolingo, we have like two premium offerings: Super Duolingo and Duolingo Max. Duolingo Max is our, I guess, like AI powered like subscription where we have several AI features. One of them being video call with Lily, where we have a role character Lily. You can practice your language by talking to her and then just kind of engage like those talking skills, but then you also get responses from like an OpenAI model. And of course, that has a cost with it. So that's where this graph comes into play, where we actually do measure that video call cost per session, which is that blue line. And then we also have a forecast the cost per session, which is this yellow that our finance team has wonderfully made for us. I'm sorry, again, no numbers, but having this unit economic is able to help align finance and engineering to talk the same language. And we're also able to kind of like have insights into like increases in that video call cost per session, as well as decreases. So by able to kind of like focusing on those like dependencies that say our video call team works on, they're able to kind of optimize this, show finance that they're able to make like a pretty big dip in changes, and then they can readjust their forecast. So we're able to kind of like keep like a like healthy costs for our features. And we can extend this to other things as well. But oh yeah, we can extend this to like other parts of the business as well. But I'll probably talk about those like later in like the or what's next. But yeah, next slide, Brent. Yeah. So other case studies where I guess we want to kind of like give you examples of where FinOps and our relationship with AWS is coming to play. So we're going to talk about optimizing our CloudFront usage as well as our Dynamo, and then finally EC2. So so essentially expanding our CloudFront usage. Now, having CloudFront in front of our APIs is great for more than just static content. Ideally, it can help learners connect to our service quicker for wherever they are around the world without having to directly travel to, say, somewhere like US East 1 all the time. And this helps for performance where people can wait less. We can take advantage of AWS's infrastructure and deliver content more quickly and reliably, and hopefully not cost as much. Um, and the one great thing is since at Duolingo Scale we have a lot of courses, a lot of content, we're able to work with AWS to have a I guess I say significant bandwidth usage where we're able to essentially the more we're using CloudFront, the more we're able to save on our bill. So working with our AWS teams, we were able to identify like CloudFront distributions we were using heavily and how we could apply that to other distributions that didn't have other ALBs that didn't have CloudFront in front of them. So someone on our team was able to essentially create a new CloudFront distribution, run an experiment, and seamlessly migrate traffic over to using CloudFront without any learner disruption. And because of that, we were able to save more than 20% on our bandwidth transferred out. And the big point of this story is if you're able to just know your usage and know where your business is growing and also work with AWS on these usage discounts, you're able to kind of save big and also still scale big. This wouldn't really make sense if you're like a small startup, but at our scale, it was a really great lever that we could pull.
Yeah, and just to add to that, one of the other things that this enabled as well is additional security protections that we can put in place at the edge, through like WAF and other Shield Advance. And so those are some additional discussions that have piggybacked off the back of this, and so have opened up new opportunities to make Duolingo more secure, et cetera. So, and did just want to also highlight just to add on these case studies are diving a level deeper with Duolingo because they had done all of the cost optimization, RI savings plans, et cetera. And these cost optimizations really required collaboration, between us to help understand that architecture and where those cost efficiencies, where those efficiencies could be introduced. So, right, go ahead, JP.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. And then the next one, DynamoDB. So this is our second largest line item in our monthly bill. And our engineers will love Dynamo. I love Dynamo. I mean, it's a NoSQL database, it's flexible, it's great. But unfortunately, but I think, but due to that flexibility, like most of our engineers anyway feel like not confident using Dynamo. Like, what if we're using the queries wrong, the APIs, are we storing things correctly? So we did hear a bunch of concerns about this, and then that's where the DynamoDB Platinum program came in, where we're able to work with AWS. We had, I think, Dynamo like SMEs come and visit and kind of like teach us about how to use about how to like properly store data in Dynamo, query effectively to kind of group data in like a more sensible way while keeping the cost reasonably low and keeping it performant. So engineers felt definitely more empowered and naturally wanted to optimize their own tables because of this, which was I think a great thing that way we can have more people using these managed database solutions and just overall programming better. But beyond, I guess, like having engineers like tune their RCUs and WCUs as well as their API calls, there were some other wins that we had with Dynamo as well. The first one being, I think, purchasing reserve capacity for our capacity units. And we did work with like Brent, and we also had a plan of other engineers where we want to like look at our usage on like a quarterly basis and identify where we can like buy coverage, but also still have something for engineers to still optimize their RCs and WCs. So on the bottom right, took a screenshot from the recommendations portal. Again, no hard numbers, but it says we can save 67% on our capacity if we just like buy up to like 3 years of reserve capacity. So we worked to have a number that we buy a number that worked for us, and we were able to save at least like I think 25% on our Dynamo cost by just like looking at our high level account usage. And then even beyond that, like beyond buying reserve capacity, we also worked again with AWS to like identify several like very large Dynamo tables that weren't being accessed as often, but still were pretty big and costing us. So we were able to move those storage tiers from the regular to infrequent access, where we essentially would save on the data stored, but we pay a little more for the API calls to retrieve data. But doing the math and looking at those tables, that made sense for us and helped us save another 10%. So just working out the AWS, we're able to empower engineers and also just get some neat tricks to save on our tables, just looking at like how we're using them.
Yeah. And just the one thing I'll add to that is, you know, over the 3 to 6 months that we were engaged in this with Duolingo, we were, I think, almost able to cut their DynamoDB bill in half. But then what we saw after that is teams felt much more confident, as JP mentioned, in using DynamoDB. And we saw, all new workloads and services being built use DynamoDB, so that usage stepped up, after that, after that. And so that kind of spoke to the power of this, enabling those teams to be confident in using DynamoDB, and it became the database of choice at Duolingo. So
And it's only growing. We do love it. So yeah. Yeah, and then finally, our last kind of case study is I call it like expand your EC2 instance pool. So I mean, it's our largest like line item bill. I think everyone on this call knows EC2. We love it. A lot of things are built off of compute. And so for our FinOps team took a twofold approach into trying to optimize our EC2 usage. The first one being the Graviton migration, because I guess Graviton instances like run more efficiently. They're also at like 20% cheaper, which is great for us. And then the year 2025, a lot more dependencies build for both like ARM and Intel, which is really great. So our team, we were able to identify several, I guess, like very compute heavy microservices that would fit the bill for an easy Graviton migration. So we were able to just kind of like port those services over pretty easily, just build them for ARM and then deploy those to ARM respective EC2 instances. And then we noticed we were able to save flat 20% on those workloads, which is super cool. And then but the more interesting, I think, ARM, or the one that required more AWS like coordination, was essentially expanding our EC2 instance types. And to Duolingo, for the longest time, we ran on just these specific like EC2 instances that had the NVMe option or the ones with like expanded storage. And it's like kind of like looking at like how we've evolved over the years. We haven't really like updated that specific option. So I was able to talk to Brent a lot, and we were able to kind of like make sure if we're going to get rid of these instance stores, make sure we have the appropriate EBS, make sure we're using the right like DP storage, like using GP3 instead of GP2, and just also making sure we're checking on our volumes, make sure we're going to be filling up with like Docker images, logs, or anything. So we were able to test this on some smaller clusters successfully, and then when we were able to roll this out to all of our production instances, we were able to notice I think at least like a 10% like a monthly bill reduction on our compute, specifically for like our spot compute and everything. And the bottom left here is like a screenshot I took from Cloud Zero where we did notice that we had like a nice little dip in our compute storage, and it was pretty cool to see that. I know it's kind of hard to read the dates, but we started working on this in like May to June. So then we noticed like obviously it dipping in June, and then in July it also kind of like was also a little bit lower. But yeah, just here we were able to kind of like make this like big platform shift without disrupting developer velocity or really getting anyone's way. And we didn't have to wait optimize our workloads that much. We just simply just reconfigured EC2 and also just took advantage of running on Graviton where we could.
And I'll add to that, JP. I think this all occurred while Duolingo has been growing their daily active users at like 43% year over year. So I think, even any type of decrease is, significant based on how Duolingo has been growing. So
Yeah, it's definitely cool to like move the number down while the DAUs still go up. So that's the great thing there. So yeah, with all those case studies, like I guess like what does that mean for us? So our FinOps team was officially formed in January of this year, and we were already able to save 10% on our annual bill in 2025, which is pretty great for us. And we still do have more work, but the cool thing, the other takeaways are our finance team loves us since we're able to make the numbers go down, but more importantly, kind of create these unit economics that they're able to kind of like show engineers and then collaborate with them. Engineering teams also enjoy working with us because we're able to give them clear like visibility into their costs as well as like good actions that they can take to optimize their services. And having this like FinOps culture where people can easily see their costs, optimize it themselves, it allows my team, the FinOps team, to work on more platform level optimizations, like we just talked about, to help drive better cost optimization. Yeah. And yeah, so I guess what's next for us? So I think the big one is always additional unit economics, since it just doesn't stop at D8 cost per day your video call session. Some what we're looking at would be like cost per CI/CD build, cost per like A/B experiment, and then cost per notification. That way we can kind of help these teams like identify bottlenecks or just kind of like better target their metrics and make sure that they see the appropriate utilization, I guess, efficiency with how those respective stacks are growing. And then, of course, more workload right sizing. So we talked about just doing like platform level optimizations, but we can also want to try and like work on tools to help like service owners or teams better optimize their workloads, whether it's for databases like Dynamo or RDS, or even, of course, EC2 instance pool, like because some you might have like some more network down services, more compute heavy. So we want to like look at better optimizing those for those respective teams. And then the golden path here, the golden path is great for us because if we can like run like on like one basic space set of framework, like one basic framework for or several or like reduce number of frameworks, this way we can keep track of things from a security perspective. It's easier to kind of optimize for, and it's also just like less overhead for developers and platform engineers. So it just kind of helps us save money, have more performance, and just overall have a healthier cloud. Yeah, that's a bit of that. Um, Thank you so much. And yeah, I guess can we take questions?
yeah. Yeah. Any questions anyone had? I'm not seeing the chat, or I'm not able to view the chat. So
Yeah, Manish
Yeah,
has a question here. Yeah,
yeah,
sure. There is hand.
yeah. Thank you for presenting that. It was really insightful. Uh, Question on the CloudFront that usage that I saw. I know from performance and the cost side. I was wondering if it had to do something on the data transfer. Was data transfer was on one of the topics also was considered for the cloud when we talk about CloudFront as well. So I was wondering because we've seen that a lot. Basically, the CloudFront helps with that as well, since the caching and performance side as well, right? So I was wondering if that there's a color to that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that definitely helped with like some like the data to transfer into caching, because we also do have like some APIs that would like return like say like a list of courses.
Mm,
Yeah, so I think that was a big thing, but I think for us it was mainly just like our bandwidth transferred out, since we do have like some pretty meaty responses that we are giving to people, and I think that was like the big driver. But we also had the added benefit of just like performance and like appropriate caching for some of these like static responses.
okay, got it. Thank you.
Let's look at the chat. See. From Robbie, were there cost savings around data aging life cycles, especially around compliance requirements? So yeah, I think we didn't like talk about it here, but I think we definitely had some for like our storage, where I think we definitely had like I guess like some like S3 things like lying around. So then we just did apply like lifecycle policies, and we did see like some savings there, but I just kind of wanted to highlight these three are like the big like platform things that FinOps were doing.
Yeah.
But
And one of the things, I
yeah,
think, JP, this is before you joined the FinOps team, but Duolingo did adopt S3 storage lines. And that's, I think, provided a lot of insights. And I'm not sure how much you're using it today, but that provided a lot of insights initially around how they're using S3. And I think led to some of those cleanup efforts that you did early last year. So,
yeah. Because I know like at least there was like a couple that like I saw like say like some like pictures or whatever, and I'm like these things are from like decades ago or something, and it's like we just want to get rid of that.
JP, that's a great story. Every time I hear how the unit economics really shapes, especially around the price performance, is shaping the architecture of the workload, not the other way around there. This is awesome. This coming full circle there. A few questions there related to the FinOps. You said you joined recently with the FinOps. When we hear from customers there, this is a luxury to have a dedicated FinOps team or a person there. From prior to you joining the team there, was it more of a ad hoc approach to FinOps at Duolingo? Perhaps you can share some insight for folks or customers that are really trying to mature or establish their FinOps person. And so part of that question is what skills and abilities are needed for somebody to be successful in that role?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, so I think prior to like me joining FinOps, it was kind of like I kind of talked about those as like cost champions we had, where essentially I think we had kind of like focused on like one person at the time, like when we first started, where I think we had someone named Max, he was kind of like our core FinOps person. Then we had someone else join, Vitor, who also was like a big cost champion. So they were kind of working on the best practices, working with like third parties, looking at like our RI savings plans, working with finance. But as we kept growing, they were, like their time kind of like got split amongst more projects. And then I think we realized we were like, oh, we actually do need like a dedicated FinOps team. And we're not like a huge team. I think we're like 3 engineers and our engineering manager. But yeah, so essentially it's been kind of like a fun journey where it's like at first we're like, oh, we can just have like one person work on it and another person. Then we're like, oh, there's a lot of optimizations we can make. So I think that's how we kind of like got into like our having a more dedicated team to look at this as their full-time job. And then as for skills, I think to be successful in this, since I've been at Duolingo for 5 years, I've been working mainly on just like infrastructure and just like knowing where service costs are going, whether it's from like AWS or GCP. So I think just like having familiarity with like the services, and then also like having a relationship with like the finance team, being able to kind of talk to them, kind of like to get their guides, understand like how they're doing their reporting to like their auditors and accountants, and like kind of like making sure like I guess we can like kind of give them those metrics that they care about, but then also give them like an insight into like what's driving up or down costs. Not necessarily being like we're gonna save a bunch of money, but like hey, like we first want to understand the cost. So that's where like the tagging and just being able to actively monitor and be like, all right, we can point to like this thing being like the exact driver. So once you're able to know where the costs are coming from, then you can like have a conversation on how to optimize it.
Oh, I love it that it was more of a grassroots approach rather than a top-down from a leadership saying we need a FinOps person, because that's where we hear about how do you justify the ROI of a FinOps team or dedicated FinOps team, so to speak there. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to hear. Second question was about the Cloud Zero, and I think in the last slide you mentioned,
Mhm.
I think it looks like a kudos dashboard or the quick site dashboard there. When you mentioned your multi-cloud there, this is a two-part question. The
Mhm.
unit economics when you mentioned, is that considering only AWS or your entire or multi-cloud infrastructure there? If so, how are you normalizing across the clouds when you get to that unit cost there?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, so our unit economics are considering the multi-cloud stuff. So like even like the one I talked about, like cost per video call, like we are focusing on like we have a partnership with like OpenAI, so we're focusing on like our OpenAI, like our AI costs. Even for like DAU, like because like we do run off of like Azure, GCP, of course AWS. So we do like normalize for those things. And of course we do have like specific delineations on like, we're like, all right, this is like an AI cost thing. This is more of a hosting cost. So we do have to, I guess, like kind of like selectively look at our bill and be like, all right, which things are like specific, like things that are being driven by DAUs versus not. And then as for normalizing your cross clouds, this is like one that we're still like evolving where I think right now we kind of like use like our DAUs as well as like that like cost. And like that's kind of like our big thing so we can see where it's trending up and down. But yeah, it's like the metrics always evolving since we do find different line items where we're like, oh, this doesn't really make sense since it's like a flat thing. Like, say for example, AWS support. It's like, is that really like growing with the DAU since it's going to be like something you agree with versus like say EC2 usage? You're like, all right, we're paying like compute per hour, so that makes more sense. So it's always changing in short.
See, that's great. And hopefully my last question is about, I see this as a more of organization change, let alone a culture change, so to speak there. The
Mhm.
concept of visibility and the ownership here. When you started, what are some of the lessons learned from a best practices or blueprint you would give somebody that is starting off? Because change is always difficult, or let alone the culture change, so to speak there. And how you said that the part-time champions didn't work. Uh, of course, 3 people may not be enough for larger
Right.
organizations. How do you scale, or how do you force multiply there? If you can throw some nuggets from your experience there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question because I guess like going from 2 champions to like a team of 3 is obviously not a big jump in numbers. But I think the big thing for us is I think we had like more of like a plan towards like automating like more tools. So we've been like leveraging, I think like looking at like say like we're I guess like having a good relationship with your finance team for starters, since like talking to them about how like we're I guess like how we want to like make sure cost visibility is there. And then I think culturally too, like I think one thing for me is like I've worked on a bunch of different teams here, so I've been able to like leverage those previous relationships, like working with like different team leads and area leads to kind of like make these like costs like because we also have different views for like say like cost per team and stuff, and we don't have like a strict budget per se, but we just want to make it visible. Where I think Duolingo we have a culture where we like to run experiments, we like to try and like ship things. So, and ideally, I think if we make these like metrics visible, then people we're just kind of like relying like on our established culture where people like want to optimize for that. Like we're not exactly. I mean, we do also like gamification as well. So you might have like a leaderboard or like some report where you're like who's doing better or where. But in short, I think just kind of like I think that's leaning into the strengths of your culture to build a FinOps team. I think first making sure the data is like really consistent and making sure that you know like where things are going, and then be able to kind of like I guess like tie that to like a business metric where, for example, I think people don't always want to choose like the more expensive thing because I think people make decisions because sometimes they just don't know. But if you present them with more data points, then they're more likely to pick a happier medium where they're able to optimize their cloud spend. And then sometimes they're like, oh, if I'm not spending like say thousands of dollars here, maybe I can reinvest it somewhere else. So I think it just kind of like leads like a nice synergy if you're able to lean into your culture, your existing company's culture strengths, and then just kind of like create some automation to kind of make sure you're able to scale that accordingly. And that way you can just focus on, I guess, like kind of like the harder problems or like the more impactful ones to build more trust. And then it just gets easier over time.
That's great. I know the initial euphoria is always there. You get the quick wins, but
Mhm.
sustaining it over years there is always a challenge. So it's good to see that you have a game plan to really keep it going there. One last question before I hand it off to Manish for his question there. Uh, Manish, why don't you go ahead and I'll hold off my question here.
Yeah, thanks, Sridhar. Yeah, I love to hear your experience on the the Graviton migration that you're talking about. Typically, like that typically what we hear is like, okay, I know there is a benefit out there, right? But there's a lot of effort that needs to be done basically to get there, right? So how you're having that conversation, if you can shed some light there, basically, right? And convincing the teams to go in that direction, right? So that experience, if you can share.
Yeah. I guess like for us, I think with Duolingo, I'm grateful I work with a lot of engineers who are always excited to like adopt like new features once you've proven them out. So, 'cause I think when we first like started seeing Graviton workloads come up in like say a couple of years ago, everyone's like, I don't know, like does this thing build for ARM? Like when like say Apple Silicon was coming out, we're like, we don't know. But now we were able to have those conversations this year. Everyone's like, oh yeah, it's like everyone's like, well, my laptop runs ARM. Why shouldn't my service? So I think getting that buy-in was pretty easy. But then of course, like looking at like EC2 machine availability, like because we also run on the spot market, so sometimes like that can be constrained for Graviton. So I think for us, we had to kind of like I think building the trust is pretty easy, is given the technology's maturity, but also just making sure that we have like the workloads and also making sure we have a plan to say like shift back to like Intel worst case. And also just being able to kind of like assure teams like, hey, we've had like these workloads running for so long and they've had such great stability. Let's extend that to everything else. So I think it's just making sure like the technology becomes like boring at a time, but we still have the cost savings and then just being able to kind of experiment with that.
Well, thank you for sharing.
I love it. My question was related to that about the review cycle. Do you review on a weekly basis or a daily basis? And is there anything on the roadmap to tie these alerts into your deployment pipelines saying this has gone up? Let me pick some other instance or something like that.
That definitely is something we are considering, because like right now I think our team we do review costs on like a weekly basis. We also do have anomalies that do come up like I would say daily, where it's like a costing might incur like say T minus like 2 days. So, like you might get an alert like 2 days later due to how like it's like the curve reports and everything. So in short, and I think tying it to like the deployment pipeline would be great, because like sometimes we do notice this with like some things that do have like a better billing cadence, where we're like, oh hey, like say if we're calling like an AI feature, you can see like those token charges shoot up immediately, as opposed to like an EC2 thing might be like a little bit of like a delay. But yeah, in short, I think we do have like some like experiment reports where we do like show like some costs incurred, where we're like, oh hey, like we do notice like this feature is driving up costs a little bit. But we would, I think, yeah, I think tied into like deployments would be like something we definitely want to explore down the line.
That's great.